I will be honest. The moment my mother-in-law whispered in my ear during my baby shower, I knew my marriage was already over, even though my husband was standing 10 feet away, smiling for pictures like he had not stolen the last gift my dead mother ever left me. I was 34, 8 months pregnant, barefoot in my sister's living room in Austin, Texas, holding a tiny yellow onesie against my stomach while everyone clapped, laughed, and told me how lucky I was to have a husband like Nathan. Nathan looked perfect that afternoon, almost painfully perfect, with his pressed blue shirt, his hand resting gently on my lower back, and that warm public smile he used whenever people needed to believe he was the kind of man who protected his family. Then his mother, Diane, stepped behind me while everyone was watching the cake being cut, squeezed my wrist hard enough to hurt, and whispered, "Do not go home with him tonight, and do not let him touch your mother's inheritance account." I turned toward her so fast the room blurred for a second. Diane was not dramatic by nature, and in the 3 years I had been married to Nathan, she had never once interfered in our fights, our money, our plans, or even the ugly tension between me and Nathan's ex-wife, Lauren. But that day, her face was pale, her lipstick was shaking at the corners, and her eyes were locked on Nathan with the kind of fear a mother only shows when she finally admits her son has become dangerous. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. She looked past me, smiled for a photo someone was taking, then leaned closer and said, "Smile until everyone leaves. Check the account before he drives you anywhere, and if the balance is wrong, call your sister before you call him." My first instinct was not to believe her. That is the embarrassing part one still hate admitting. I had trusted Nathan with everything, including the $72,000 my mother left me after she died from a stroke 2 years earlier, because he had sat beside me in the hospital, held my hand through the funeral, and told me that money was sacred because it came from the woman who raised me alone. He was the one who suggested we keep it separate. He was the one who said, "That is your safety net, Emma, and I never want you to feel trapped." So when Diane warned me not to let him touch it, my mind rejected the words before my heart could process them, because accepting them meant accepting that my husband had not only lied, but had chosen the cruelest money in my life to steal. Across the room, Nathan laughed at something my father said, then looked over at me with that soft husband smile that used to calm me down. This time, it made my skin crawl. The baby kicked hard, like my body knew something before I did. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the closed toilet seat, and opened the banking app with hands so swollen and shaky that I mistyped my password twice. The inheritance account was supposed to hold just over $68,000 after the small withdrawals I had made for medical bills, the nursery, and one final payment on my student loan. When the app loaded, the balance showed $14,912. For a few seconds, I could not understand the number. I stared at it like the screen had glitched, because my brain kept trying to add the missing money back in, as if grief, pregnancy, and panic had somehow made me forget how numbers worked. Then I opened the transaction history. There were transfers I had never approved. $5,000 here, $8,000 there, $12,000 on a Tuesday morning when I had been at my OB appointment, listening to my daughter's heartbeat while my husband was apparently moving my dead mother's money somewhere else. The labels were vague at first. Household reserve, short-term repayment, private escrow. I scrolled faster, breathing through my mouth because the bathroom suddenly felt too hot, and then I saw a payment memo that made everything inside me go quiet. Whitaker Property Holdings. Whitaker was Lauren's last name, Nathan's ex-wife. The woman he claimed he barely spoke to anymore, except when they had to discuss his 12-year-old son, Caleb. I sat there, 8 months pregnant, surrounded by pink balloons and baby gifts, realizing my husband had been sending my mother's inheritance to a name connected to the woman he swore was only part of his past. Someone knocked on the door. "Emma?" Nathan called softly. "You okay in there?" His voice was gentle, almost loving, and that made it worse because I was looking at proof of betrayal while he stood outside pretending to worry about my blood pressure. "I'm fine," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. There was a pause. Not long, just long enough. Then he said, Mom said something to you, didn't she? My stomach tightened. He did not ask if I was sick. He did not ask if the baby was okay. He asked about his mother. That was when I knew Diane had not warned me out of nowhere. She had discovered something, confronted him, or threatened him, and now Nathan was checking how much damage she had done before I could get help. I slipped my phone into my dress pocket, flushed the toilet for no reason, washed my hands with cold water, and opened the door. Nathan stood close enough that I almost bumped into him. His smile was still there, but his eyes were different now, flat and watchful, like he was measuring every breath I took. You scared me, he said, placing one hand on my stomach. I stepped back before I could stop myself. For the first time in our marriage, his touch did not feel protective. It felt like ownership. I just needed a minute, I said. He looked toward the living room, where people were still laughing, then lowered his voice and said, "Whatever my mother told you, she has been confused lately, and I need you not to let her stress you out today." Confused. That word slid into the room like a warning. Because Diane was a retired nurse who remembered everyone's birthdays, corrected Nathan's tax paperwork every April, and could spot a lie across a dinner table before dessert. She was not confused. She was scared. I walked past him before he could stop me, returned to the living room, and found Diane standing near the gift table with both hands wrapped around a paper cup she had not drunk from. When our eyes met, she knew I had checked. She did not ask. She just mouthed one word: leave. I smiled through the rest of the shower like a woman in a photograph nobody would ever know was taken during the last hour of her old life. I hugged guests. I opened gifts. I thanked my aunt for the stroller. I let Nathan kiss my temple while my sister took pictures, even though every part of me wanted to scream that the man beside me had been feeding everyone a love story while draining the account my mother had built for my freedom. When the party finally ended, Nathan grabbed the diaper bag, kissed my sister goodbye, and said, "Come on, babe, let's get you home." Before I could answer, Diane stepped between us. "She's staying with her sister tonight," she said. Nathan's face changed so quickly that only I saw it. The warmth disappeared. The control appeared. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Lauren. You need to ask Nathan why your mother's money is paying for my house." I read Lauren's message while Nathan stood beside the front door with the diaper bag in his hand, smiling at my sister like a patient husband. And I remember thinking how terrifying it is when someone can look completely normal while your whole life is cracking open behind your eyes. "This is Lauren. You need to ask Nathan why your mother's money is paying for my house." I locked my phone before Nathan could see the screen, but he noticed the movement anyway, because men who hide things from you become experts at watching your hands, your face, your breathing, and every tiny sign that you know more than you should. "Who was that?" he asked, still smiling. "My OB's office," I said, and the lie came out so smoothly it scared me. Diane looked at me from across the room, and when our eyes met, she gave the smallest shake of her head, like she was begging me not to confront him in front of everyone. Not while I was pregnant. Not while he still thought he could control the drive home. My sister, Olivia, must have felt something shift too, because she stepped closer and said, "Emma is exhausted, so I'm keeping her here tonight, and you can pick up the gifts tomorrow." Nathan's jaw tightened, but only for a second. Then he laughed softly, the way he always did when he wanted people to believe he was the reasonable one in the room. "Liv, come on," he said. "She's my wife. She's 8 months pregnant, and she needs her own bed." That sentence sounded loving if you did not know what was under it. But I heard the warning. My wife. My baby. My decision. I placed one hand on my stomach and said, "I want to stay here tonight." The room went quiet in that awful way rooms do when people suddenly realize they are watching something private become public. Nathan looked at me, then at Diane, then back at me, and I saw him connect the pieces with frightening speed. "What did she tell you?" he asked. Nobody answered. His voice dropped lower. "Emma, whatever my mother said, you need to understand she has been making things up because she does not like Lauren, and she does not like the fact that I still have responsibilities from my previous marriage." It was clever. He did not deny anything specific. He just threw enough words into the air to make the truth look messy. Diane stepped forward, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked at her son with no softness at all. "Leave," she said. Nathan stared at her like she had slapped him. "You don't get to do this," he said. "I should have done it sooner," she answered. Something passed between them then, something old, something I was not part of, and it made me realize Diane had not discovered one secret that morning. She had been carrying a history. Nathan turned back to me, and his face changed again, becoming tender, wounded, almost pleading, which hurt because that version of him had always been the hardest for me to resist. "Emma," he said quietly, "please do not let them scare you when you're this close to having our daughter." Our daughter. He used the baby because he knew exactly where my fear lived. But my phone buzzed again in my pocket, and this time, I did not look at Nathan before reading it. Lauren had sent another message. "He told me you agreed to help because the house was for Caleb. I didn't know it was inheritance money. I didn't know about your mother." I stared at the words until they blurred. Caleb was Nathan's son, and I loved that boy in the careful, complicated way a stepmother loves a child who already has two parents and still somehow needs more stability than either of them can provide. Nathan had always said Lauren was reckless with money, always behind on bills, always using Caleb as leverage. And I had believed him because believing your husband is easier than believing you married someone who speaks badly about one woman while stealing from another. I looked up at Nathan. "How much did you send her?" I asked. His face went still. That was answer enough. Olivia grabbed my arm gently and pulled me toward the hallway, while Diane moved between Nathan and me like a woman who had finally stopped protecting her son from consequences. "I'm calling you tomorrow," Nathan said, and now his voice was not soft at all. "You and I are going to talk like adults, without an audience." "No," Olivia said. "Anything you need to say tonight can go through me." He laughed once, sharp and ugly. "You have no idea what you're getting involved in." Diane's hand shook as she reached for her purse, but her voice stayed firm. "She knows enough." Nathan looked at his mother, and I will never forget the coldness in his eyes when he said, "You should have kept your mouth shut." Then he walked out. The second the door closed, my knees almost gave out, and Olivia guided me to the guest room, sat me on the bed, and took the phone from my trembling hands before I could accidentally drop it on the floor. "What account?" she asked. I told her everything. The inheritance, the balance, the transfers, the name Whitaker, Diane's warning, and Lauren's messages. Olivia did not cry, gasp, or say something comforting that would have wasted time. She opened her laptop and said, "We are going to screenshot everything before he tries to change the story." That was when I started to understand the difference between panic and protection. Panic makes you freeze. Protection makes you document. We took screenshots of every transfer, every memo line, every date, and every balance change. Then Olivia told me to forward everything to a new email address Nathan did not know existed. While she worked, Diane stood in the doorway, looking 10 years older than she had during the baby shower. "I found out yesterday," she said. My head lifted. "Found out what?" She swallowed hard. "Nathan came by my house looking for old tax papers because he said he needed them for a refinance, but he left his folder on my kitchen table, and when I opened it, I saw your name on documents you had never mentioned." "What documents?" Diane looked at my stomach, then at the floor. "A loan application." The room tilted. Olivia stopped typing. "What kind of loan?" she asked. Diane pulled a folded paper from her purse and handed it to me. I recognized Nathan's neat handwriting immediately, but the numbers on the page made my chest tighten so hard I had to breathe through it. There was my name, my credit score, my income, my inheritance account listed as an asset, and beneath it, a requested amount of $180,000. I could barely speak. What was he buying? Diane closed her eyes. Lauren's house. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my phone buzzed again. Lauren had sent a screenshot this time, and at the top was a mortgage statement with her name on it, the Whitaker address, and a payment history showing large deposits that matched the missing transfers from my account. But the message underneath was worse. "Emma, I need you to know something before he tells you I trapped him. Nathan begged me not to sell the house because he said he needed somewhere safe to go if your marriage didn't work after the baby came. I read that sentence once, then again, then a third time, because I could not make my mind accept that while I was washing baby clothes and folding tiny socks, my husband was using my mother's money to prepare an exit plan with his ex-wife. Diane covered her mouth. Olivia whispered, "Oh my God." I wanted to cry, but something harder than sadness moved through me first. Rage. Not loud rage. Not messy rage. The kind that clears your vision. I called Lauren before fear could talk me out of it. She answered on the second ring, and the first thing she said was, "I swear to you, I did not know that money came from your mother." Her voice did not sound smug, guilty, or triumphant. It sounded scared. "Then what did you think it was?" I asked. She exhaled shakily. "He said you two had agreed to help stabilize the house for Caleb, because if I lost it, Caleb would have to change schools." I closed my eyes. Caleb. Of course, he had used Caleb. He had taken the one reason I would never question too harshly and wrapped the theft inside it like a shield. Lauren kept talking, faster now. "He told me you were aware of the payments, but he also told me not to contact you because you were hormonal, stressed, and jealous of our co-parenting relationship." That word hit me like a slap. Hormonal. He had prepared her to dismiss me before I even knew there was something to confront. "What else did he tell you?" I asked. Lauren went quiet. Too quiet. Then she said, "You need to check whether he has life insurance on you." The room went completely silent. My hand tightened around the phone. "What did you just say?" Lauren's voice dropped lower. 2 weeks ago, he asked me if I still had the name of the insurance agent we used when we were married, and when I asked why, he said he needed to make sure you and the baby were protected if something went wrong during delivery. I felt the baby move under my palm, and for the first time that night, fear swallowed the rage whole. Because stealing money was one kind of betrayal. Preparing paperwork around my death was something else entirely. Olivia took the phone from my hand, put it on speaker, and asked Lauren to repeat everything slowly. Lauren did. Every word. Every date. Every lie. Then she said, "There's one more thing, and I don't know how to say it without sounding insane." My throat went dry. "Say it." Lauren took a shaky breath. "Nathan was at my house this morning, and he was not alone." I looked at Diane. Diane looked at me. Then Lauren said the sentence that made every person in that room stop breathing. "He brought a woman from a law office, and they were talking about getting your signature before the baby came." The moment Lauren said Nathan had brought a woman from a law office to her house, and they had talked about getting my signature before the baby came, I felt something colder than fear move through me, because stealing my mother's money was already unforgivable. But planning legal papers around my pregnancy meant my husband was not reacting to a crisis. He was building one before I even knew I was inside it. Olivia kept the phone on speaker, opened a blank document on her laptop, and told Lauren to start from the beginning, because if Nathan had already convinced one woman I was hormonal and another woman that I was confused, then every detail needed a timestamp before he had time to turn facts into fog. Lauren said Nathan arrived at her house around 9 that morning, driving the truck he only used when he wanted to look like a responsible father, and sitting beside him was a woman in a gray suit with a leather folder, a notary stamp, and a smile that made Lauren immediately feel like the meeting had been arranged long before she was invited into it. She said she was helping with a family financial transfer, Lauren told us, her voice tight. "Nathan said you were too pregnant to deal with paperwork, but that you had agreed to sign after the shower because the money needed to move before the end of the month." My mouth went dry because I had agreed to nothing, and the only paperwork Nathan had mentioned that week was the hospital pre-registration form, which he had offered to take care of because I was tired, swollen, and sleeping badly. Diane grabbed the edge of the dresser and closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she looked ashamed in a way that told me there was more. "He asked me last week whether your signature had changed since pregnancy swelling," she said quietly, and I thought he was talking about medical forms. Olivia stopped typing. I looked at Diane. That detail was too specific, too ugly, too planned. Nathan had not only needed my signature, he had been thinking about whether he could copy it well enough if my handwriting looked different. Lauren continued, saying the woman from the law office had spread several documents across the kitchen table, And although Lauren had not read every page, she saw my full legal name, my inheritance account balance, her mortgage company, and a phrase that stayed in her mind because it sounded harmless until she said it out loud. Spousal financial authorization. Olivia immediately searched the phrase, then looked at me with that hard, protective expression again. That could mean a lot of things, she said, but in the wrong hands, it can be used to make access look like consent. I wanted to call Nathan right then and demand answers, but Olivia shook her head before I even reached for my phone because she knew the first rule faster than I did. Do not warn a person who is still hiding evidence. So instead, we called my bank. I sat on Olivia's guest bed with one hand on my stomach, listening to hold music while my baby rolled under my ribs, and I remember thinking how absurd it was that I had spent months worrying about the right crib, the safest car seat, and whether I would be a calm mother, while the man beside me had been studying how to drain the one account my mother had left untouched by anyone but me. When the fraud representative finally came on the line, I gave my name, verified my identity, and asked for the inheritance account to be frozen immediately. The representative paused. Then her voice changed. "Mrs. Parker," she said carefully, "there is already a pending request to add an authorized user to this account." The room went still. I asked who. She said the request had been submitted electronically 2 days earlier, and the added user listed was Nathan Parker, with a supporting document uploaded under the category of marital authorization. I pressed my palm against my stomach because the baby kicked hard, as if even she felt the shock move through me. "I did not authorize that," I said. The representative told me she was placing a security hold on the account, flagging the uploaded document for fraud review and removing online transfer access until I came into a branch with identification. But then she added one more thing that made my spine tighten. "There was also a call from someone claiming to be your husband," she said. "He asked whether funds could be released faster if you were hospitalized and temporarily unable to appear in person." Diane sat down like her legs had failed. Olivia whispered a curse under her breath. I could not speak for several seconds, because suddenly Lauren's warning about life insurance did not sound dramatic anymore. It sounded like one piece of a structure Nathan had been building around the worst possible moment of my life. Delivery. Hospital. Pain. Medication. Forms. Signatures. A newborn. A husband standing beside my bed, telling nurses he knew what I wanted. The representative gave me a fraud case number, and Olivia wrote it down while I answered security questions with a voice that did not feel like mine. Then we called the life insurance company Lauren had mentioned, and after 3 transfers, one supervisor confirmed there was a pending policy application in my name. The coverage amount was $500,000. The beneficiary was Nathan. The application had not been finalized because it still required my medical confirmation and electronic signature, but the email address connected to it was not mine. It was my name with one extra letter, just like a shadow version of me. I covered my mouth, not because I was going to scream, but because I suddenly felt like I might say something so broken it would scare everyone in the room. Nathan had always told me pregnancy made him anxious because he could not bear losing me. But now I understood that even his fear had been useful to him, because a man who talked often enough about protecting his wife could make paperwork around her death look like love. My phone started ringing. Nathan. I stared at his name until the screen went dark. Then it rang again. Then a text came through. "We need to talk before your sister poisons you against me." Another message followed. "My mom is not well, Lauren is lying, and you are making decisions while emotional." Then the third one came. "Do not freeze anything until you hear me out." Olivia read it over my shoulder and said, "Too late." For the first time all night, I almost smiled. Then Diane's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's Nathan," she said. Olivia nodded toward my phone. "Let it go." Diane did. A voicemail appeared 10 seconds later. She played it on speaker. Nathan's voice was low, controlled, and furious enough that he no longer sounded like the man from the baby shower. "Mom, you need to fix this before Emma does something stupid, because if she blocks the transfer now, Lauren loses the house, Caleb loses stability, and everything I built collapses because you couldn't stay out of my marriage." Everything I built. Not everything we built. Not our family. Not our future. His. That was when the last soft corner of my denial died. Olivia saved the voicemail, sent it to the new email account, and told Lauren to send photos of anything she had seen, including the woman's business card if she had it. Lauren went quiet. Then she said, "I do have something." A minute later, my phone buzzed with a photo. It showed a business card on Lauren's kitchen counter. Marissa Vale, Estate Planning and Family Asset Protection. Below the name was a law office address in downtown Austin. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. Behind the card, half covered by Nathan's hand, was a document title visible in the corner of the photo. Durable Power of Attorney. I had heard the phrase before, but seeing my name beneath it made the room feel like it had no air. Olivia immediately looked it up, then slowly turned the laptop toward me. "If he got this signed," she said, choosing every word carefully, "he could have tried to act on your behalf financially if you were incapacitated." Incapacitated. That word landed harder than death because it sounded clinical, legal, and clean, the kind of word people use when they want power to look like paperwork. Before anyone could speak, the doorbell rang. It was almost 10 at night. Olivia walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the porch. Then she turned toward me, her face completely drained of color. "It's Nathan," she whispered. I stood up too quickly, one hand gripping my stomach. Diane moved toward the hallway. Olivia grabbed her phone to call 911. Then another figure stepped into the porch light beside Nathan. A woman in a gray suit, holding a leather folder. The woman standing beside Nathan was the same woman Lauren had described only an hour earlier, and the second I saw the gray suit, the leather folder, and the calm expression on her face, I stopped thinking of this as a marriage falling apart and started seeing it for what it really was, a plan that had been moving forward for weeks until someone finally interrupted it. Nathan stood on Olivia's porch like he still expected this situation to end the way every disagreement in our marriage had ended before, with him talking long enough, sounding reasonable enough, and making me doubt myself just enough to regain control. But this time he wasn't walking into a conversation. He was walking into evidence. Olivia opened the door only a few inches. "What do you want?" she asked. Nathan ignored her and looked directly at me. "Emma, this has gone way too far." His voice was calm, but I could hear pressure underneath it, the kind of pressure that appears when someone realizes their timeline is collapsing. The woman beside him stepped forward slightly. "My name is Marissa Vale," she said. "I'm an attorney, and I think there has been a misunderstanding." The word almost made me laugh. A misunderstanding. My inheritance account was missing more than $50,000. A loan application existed with my information. A life insurance policy had been started using a fake email address. Someone had attempted to add Nathan to my account without permission. And she called it a misunderstanding. I folded my arms over my stomach and looked directly at her. "Did I hire you?" I asked. She hesitated. "No." "Did I ever speak with you?" "No." "Did I authorize you to represent me?" Another pause. "No." "Then stop talking like you're my attorney." Nathan's jaw tightened immediately. Marissa glanced at him before answering, and that tiny movement told me something important. She was not here for me. She was here for him. Nathan took a step closer. "Emma, nobody stole anything from you." I felt anger rise so quickly that it almost surprised me. "No?" I asked. "Then where's my mother's money?" His eyes flickered. Only for a second. But it was enough. "The money wasn't stolen," he said. "It was invested." That word landed like a punch. Invested. As if he had done me a favor. As if secretly transferring money from my inheritance account into payments connected to his ex-wife somehow qualified as financial planning. "Into Lauren's house?" I asked. For the first time all night, Nathan looked genuinely caught off guard. He had not expected Lauren to talk. He had expected me to remain isolated. That realization made me feel sick because it meant his entire strategy depended on keeping the women in his life separated from one another. Lauren isolated from me. Me isolated from Diane. Everyone isolated from the truth. "You don't understand the full situation," Nathan said. "Then explain it." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because the truth sounds much less reasonable when spoken out loud. Marissa stepped in again. The property was being protected as an asset. I stared at her. My inheritance was being used to protect my husband's ex-wife's house? Neither of them answered immediately. And that silence answered everything. Olivia laughed sharply. You people actually thought this would sound normal? Nathan ignored her. Caleb lives there. There it was. The shield. The excuse. The child. Every single time Nathan found himself cornered, he pulled Caleb into the middle because he knew nobody wanted to hurt a 12-year-old boy. I loved Caleb, but Caleb wasn't the reason $50,000 disappeared. And Caleb certainly wasn't the reason somebody was trying to obtain power of attorney over a pregnant woman weeks before delivery. I looked directly at Marissa. Did you prepare power of attorney documents for me? Her face changed. Very slightly, but enough. Nathan answered before she could. They weren't finalized. That was the wrong answer. The second those words left his mouth, everyone knew the documents existed. Even Olivia looked surprised. Nathan realized his mistake immediately. But it was too late. You prepared them, I said. Nobody denied it. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Because until that moment, I had still been searching for an explanation that wasn't evil. Careless. Reckless. Selfish. Maybe, but not evil. Now I was looking at paperwork designed to give my husband authority over my finances during one of the most vulnerable periods of my life. A period involving hospitals, medication, recovery, and exhaustion. A period when many women sign forms without reading every page because they trust the person sitting beside them. Nathan rubbed his forehead. Emma, you're making this sound sinister. Then make it sound better. Again, he couldn't. Because facts are stubborn things. The transfers happened. The loan existed. The insurance policy existed. The power of attorney documents existed. The fake email existed. No amount of smooth talking could make those facts disappear. Then my phone buzzed. A new message appeared from Lauren. This one contained a photo. I opened it. My stomach dropped instantly. The image showed Nathan sitting at Lauren's kitchen table 3 weeks earlier. Across from him sat Marissa. Between them was a stack of documents. And visible on the top page was my name. Not just my name, my signature. I zoomed in. The room disappeared around me. The signature looked like mine. Not identical. Not perfect. But frighteningly close. Close enough that most people would never question it. Close enough that a bank employee processing dozens of forms every day might never notice. Close enough to keep me awake for years. Nathan saw my face change. His expression darkened. What did she send you? I turned the screen around. For the first time that entire night, Nathan looked afraid. Real fear. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. Marissa's face lost all color. Olivia immediately took a screenshot and forwarded it to 3 separate email accounts. Nobody spoke. Then I zoomed in farther. At the bottom corner of the photo was a date. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. 3 weeks before my baby shower. 3 weeks before Diane warned me. 3 weeks before I learned my inheritance was disappearing. 3 weeks during which my husband had apparently been sitting with an attorney looking at documents carrying a signature I never wrote. Nathan finally broke the silence. It isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. Because every liar eventually reaches that sentence. Not because it's convincing. Because it's all they have left. Then another message arrived from Lauren. Only 4 words. Check the hospital file. I stared at the screen. My pulse immediately accelerated. Hospital file. The words hit harder than the forged signature. Because suddenly I remembered something Nathan had insisted on handling 2 weeks earlier. The maternity paperwork. The forms. The insurance records. The emergency contact documents. The hospital authorization packet. Nathan had told me not to worry about any of it because he wanted to take stress off my shoulders. And standing there on Olivia's porch, with an attorney beside him and a forged signature sitting on my phone screen, I realized there was a very real chance my husband had already submitted documents somewhere else using my name. I looked up at him. What did you put in my hospital file? Nathan didn't answer. And that terrified me more than anything he had said all night. Nathan did not answer, and that silence told me the hospital file was not just paperwork he had filled out to help me, but another door he had quietly opened before I even knew there was a house burning down behind me. Olivia stepped outside just enough to block the doorway with her body, while Diane stood beside me with one hand on my arm, steadying me like she was afraid I might faint before we could get the truth out of him. "What did you submit?" I asked again. Nathan looked at Marissa, then back at me. "It was standard paperwork," he said. "Emergency contacts, insurance information, delivery preferences, nothing dramatic." "Then why won't you answer clearly?" His face hardened. "Because you are acting like I'm trying to hurt you." I stared at him for a long second, and the worst part was that he still sounded offended, as if my fear was more insulting than his fraud. Marissa finally spoke, but her voice was careful now. "Mrs. Parker, I would recommend that all communication go through counsel from this point forward." Olivia laughed once. "That is the smartest thing you've said tonight." I called the hospital while standing in my sister's entryway, 8 months pregnant, barefoot, shaking, and listening to Nathan breathe on the porch like a man waiting to see which secret would surface first. After 3 transfers and 2 identity checks, a night administrator confirmed there was an advance directive packet attached to my maternity file. I had never signed an advance directive. My knees weakened so fast Diane had to guide me into a chair. The administrator said the file named Nathan as my medical decision-maker if I became unable to speak for myself, and although that alone might not have been unusual for a spouse, the uploaded document included a scanned signature that did not match the one on my driver's license. Olivia put the call on speaker. Nathan stepped closer to the open door. "Emma, that is not what you think." I looked at him through the gap. "Then what is it?" He swallowed. "It was precautionary." There it was again. A gentle word wrapped around something ugly. Precautionary. Protection. Investment. Family. Every lie came dressed like responsibility. The hospital administrator told me to come in first thing in the morning with photo identification, revoke the packet, update my contacts, and add a security note requiring verbal confirmation from me before any future documents could be accepted. Then she paused. "Mrs. Parker," she said, "there is also a birth plan document requesting that only your husband be present during labor." My chest went tight. "What?" "It lists your sister as restricted from the delivery room." Olivia went completely still. I turned toward Nathan. His face gave him away before his mouth could save him. He had removed the one person most likely to protect me. He had written my sister out of the room where I would be in pain, medicated, exhausted, and vulnerable enough to trust the wrong voice beside my bed. That was the moment something inside me changed from frightened to finished. I told the administrator to flag my file immediately, and when she said she could place a temporary alert until I appeared in person, I gave verbal confirmation twice and asked her to note that my husband was not authorized to submit or change anything on my behalf. Nathan's mask cracked. "You're humiliating me," he said. "No," I answered. "I'm interrupting you." Olivia shut the door in his face and locked it. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Nathan pounded once on the door, hard enough to make Diane flinch. "Emma," he said from outside, his voice low and furious. "Open the door." Olivia called 911. Marissa must have realized how bad this looked, because I heard her whispering sharply to him through the door, telling him to leave before the police arrived. He did not leave right away. Instead, he said the sentence that burned the last bridge between us. "You have no idea what happens if this money freezes. Not if our marriage ends. Not if I leave. Not if the baby comes early." The money. That was what scared him. By the time the police arrived, Nathan and Marissa were gone, but Olivia had doorbell footage, Lauren's screenshots, Diane's voicemail, the bank fraud number, the insurance application, and the hospital administrator's notes. The officer who took my statement looked calm, but his pen slowed when I explained the forged signature on the medical documents. He told me to stay somewhere Nathan could not access, change all passwords, freeze my credit, contact an attorney, and avoid being alone with him under any circumstances. I did not sleep that night. At dawn, Olivia drove me to the hospital, Diane followed us in her car, and Lauren met us in the parking lot with a folder pressed against her chest and guilt written all over her face. She handed me copies of mortgage statements, text messages from Nathan, and one photo that made my stomach turn. It was a screenshot of a message he had sent her 2 weeks earlier. Once Emma signs, I can move the rest without her panicking. Below it, Lauren had replied, "She knows about this, right?" Nathan had answered, "She knows enough." I read those words while standing outside the maternity entrance, one hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter move beneath my palm. She knows enough. That was how little my consent mattered to him. Not yes, not permission, not partnership. Enough. Inside the hospital, I revoked everything. I removed Nathan as emergency contact. I added Olivia. I added a password to my file. I signed a restriction that no visitors would be allowed unless I personally approved them. And when the nurse asked whether I felt safe at home, I looked at my sister, at Diane, at Lauren standing awkwardly near the wall, and finally told the truth. "No," I said. "I don't." By noon, I had a caseworker. By 3, Olivia had found me a family attorney. By 5, my bank confirmed the remaining inheritance funds were frozen and protected pending fraud review. And at 6:30, Nathan sent one final text from a number I did not recognize. "You think you're saving yourself, but you just destroyed the only plan that kept everyone afloat." I stared at the message until the baby kicked again. Then Lauren's phone rang. She looked at the screen, went pale, and whispered, "It's Caleb's school." She answered. For 10 seconds, she only listened. Then her face collapsed. When she hung up, she looked at me and said, "Nathan picked Caleb up early." My blood went cold. "Where did he take him?" Lauren shook her head, already crying. "They don't know." The moment Lauren said Caleb's school had no idea where Nathan had taken him, the whole nightmare stopped feeling like financial betrayal and became something much more dangerous, because Nathan was no longer just hiding money, documents, and signatures. He was moving people around like pieces on a board. Lauren called him again and again while standing in the hospital hallway, but every call went straight to voicemail, and with each unanswered ring, her face changed from anger to fear because Nathan always answered when Caleb was involved. By then, Nathan knew too much had gone wrong for him. He knew I had frozen the inheritance account. He knew the hospital file had been changed. He knew Diane had spoken, Lauren had sent proof, and Olivia was helping me document every single thing before he could twist the story. That was why Caleb's disappearance felt deliberate. Not random. Not emotional. Deliberate. At 8:17 that evening, Nathan finally texted Lauren and wrote, "Caleb is fine. Stop overreacting." But he gave no location, no photo, no explanation, and no proof that their son was actually safe. Lauren texted back, "Where is my son?" Nathan did not answer her. Instead, he texted me, "I never wanted this to happen." I stared at that message with my hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter move beneath my ribs, and I realized he still thought vague sadness could make him look human without forcing him to admit what he had done. Then another message arrived. "Marissa told me what you did at the hospital." That one made my blood heat because he wrote it like I had betrayed him by protecting my own medical file, as if my body, my delivery room, and my legal consent were still things he had the right to manage. I did not respond. I only forwarded every message to Olivia, Lauren, Diane, and the attorney Olivia had contacted. A few minutes later, Nathan sent one more text. "Ask Lauren who really owns the house." The room went quiet when I read it out loud. Lauren's face went pale before she said anything, and that was how I knew Nathan had not sent that message to explain the truth, but to punish her for helping me. Finally, Lauren admitted the mortgage was in her name, but Nathan secretly owned 40% of the property through a private agreement he had pressured her to sign the year before. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then everything clicked at once. Nathan had not been using my mother's money to protect Caleb's home out of fatherly sacrifice. He had been using it to protect an investment he had hidden from me while pretending his ex-wife was just an irresponsible burden from his past. The missing transfers, the refinance attempt, the fake authorization forms, The pressure to get my signature before the baby came, and the sudden panic after the account was frozen all pointed to one simple truth. He was not desperate because Lauren might lose her house. He was desperate because he might lose his stake in it. At 9:42 p.m., Diane's phone rang, and when Lauren saw Caleb's name on the screen, she answered so quickly she almost dropped the phone. Caleb's voice sounded small and frightened. He said he thought they were in Oklahoma, somewhere at a motel, and that Nathan was outside arguing with a man he did not recognize. Lauren tried to keep her voice calm, but I could see her hands shaking as she asked for the motel name, the street, anything he could see from the window. Caleb whispered that the curtains were closed. The room smelled like cigarettes, and Nathan had told him not to answer any calls unless it was his grandmother. Then he said the sentence that made every adult in that hallway freeze. Dad keeps saying everything will be okay once Emma signs the papers. I felt the air leave my lungs. Even after the bank hold, the hospital alert, the police report, and the confrontation at Olivia's house, Nathan was still chasing the same thing. My signature, my money, my legal permission. Before Lauren could ask another question, a loud male voice erupted in the background. Caleb went silent, and the call disconnected. Lauren screamed his name into a deadline. The attorney immediately told her to call the police because taking Caleb across state lines without telling his mother, while refusing to provide a location, changed the situation completely. While Lauren made the call, my phone buzzed with a new email. There was no subject line, no explanation, and no greeting. Only one attachment. I opened it with shaking hands and saw a copy of my mother's trust agreement, a document I had never seen before because Nathan had always told me the inheritance paperwork was simple and already handled. A paragraph on the first page was highlighted. It stated that no spouse could claim or access the inherited principal after marriage unless I gave written authorization myself. I read the paragraph twice, then a third time. Nathan had known. That was the part that made my stomach turn. He had known my mother protected that money from any future husband, which meant the forged signatures, the fake email, the hospital paperwork, the power of attorney attempt, and the pressure before delivery were not mistakes or misunderstandings. They were the only way he could get access to money he was never legally allowed to touch. Then I scrolled down and saw who had sent the email. It was Marissa Vale, the attorney in the gray suit. Beneath the attachment was one sentence. You need to know what Nathan is planning before tomorrow morning. When I read Marissa's message, you need to know what Nathan is planning before tomorrow morning, I felt a different kind of fear settle into my body because this was no longer a husband scrambling to hide what he had already done. This was a man with one more move planned, and every person around me knew the morning might come too late if we kept reacting instead of moving first. Olivia took the phone from my hand, forwarded the email to 3 separate accounts, saved the attachment, and told me to sit down before I fell, but I could not sit still because Caleb was somewhere in Oklahoma. My mother's trust had been targeted, and my husband was still trying to drag my signature into whatever disaster he had built. 2 minutes later, Marissa called from a blocked number. Olivia answered on speaker. For a few seconds, all we heard was traffic, a shaky breath, and a woman trying to decide whether telling the truth would cost her career. Then Marissa said, I did not know he had forged anything when this started. Nobody interrupted her. She explained that Nathan had first contacted her about family asset protection, claiming his pregnant wife was overwhelmed, his ex-wife's house was at risk, and he needed help moving funds into a structure that would protect all 3 children involved. All 3? I asked. Marissa went silent. Then Lauren's face changed before the answer came. Nathan did not have 3 children. He had Caleb, and I was pregnant with our daughter. That made 2. Marissa took another breath and said, he listed a 3rd dependent on the financial worksheet, a 4-year-old boy named Mason. Diane made a sound like the air had been knocked out of her. Lauren looked at me, then at Olivia, then back at the phone. Mason who? She asked. Marissa hesitated. I only have the first name and the mother's name from the intake form. My stomach tightened before she said it. Brianna Cole. Diane covered her mouth. She knew the name. I saw it immediately. Olivia saw it too. Diane, I said carefully, who is Brianna? Diane sat down hard in the chair beside me, and for the first time that night, she looked less like Nathan's mother and more like another woman he had trapped with his secrets. She worked for him 2 years ago, Diane whispered. He told me she moved away after some office drama. Lauren's eyes filled with stunned, bitter understanding. I felt nothing for a moment. No crying, no screaming. Just a clear, cold silence inside me as the shape of Nathan's life widened again. A hidden property, a hidden loan, a hidden insurance policy, a hidden medical directive, and now, possibly, a hidden child. Marissa continued, saying Nathan had scheduled a meeting for the next morning at a private lending office outside Dallas, where he planned to present the power of attorney, the trust documents, and the hospital authorization packet as proof that I had approved a secured loan against future distributions from my mother's trust. That would not work legally without her real consent, Olivia said. It should not, Marissa answered, and the shame in her voice was real now. But he had enough copied documents to make it look possible long enough to get temporary funding, especially if he convinced them the signature was valid and she was medically unavailable. Medically unavailable. I pressed both hands over my stomach because the phrase made my skin crawl. Nathan had been counting on my pregnancy not as something to protect, but as something to use. Marissa said she started doubting him that afternoon when Lauren confronted him about the money. But the real moment came at Olivia's porch, when she saw my face and realized I had never spoken to any attorney, never approved the documents, and never even seen my mother's trust agreement. Why didn't you say that at the door? Lauren asked sharply. Marissa did not defend herself. Because I was scared, she said. Because Nathan told me Emma was unstable, and because I had already helped prepare documents I should have questioned harder. I wanted to hate her. Part of me did. But another part of me understood that Nathan's strongest skill was not lying to one person. It was making each person believe everyone else was the problem. Marissa said Nathan had one final appointment at 9 in the morning, but he had changed the location after leaving Olivia's house. And the only clue she had was a forwarded calendar invite listing a private conference room at a hotel near the Oklahoma border. Lauren immediately called the officer handling Caleb's report and gave him every detail. Olivia sent Marissa's email to my attorney. Diane began calling relatives who might know where Nathan would go, but each answer came back empty. Then Lauren's phone buzzed. A photo appeared from Caleb. It was blurry, crooked, and taken from behind a curtain. But in the corner of the image, above the motel office door, was a sign. Red River Motor Lodge. Lauren sobbed when she saw it. Olivia searched the name, found the location in under a minute, and gave the address to police while the attorney told us not to drive there ourselves because Nathan might become more reckless if he felt cornered. But waiting felt impossible. Every minute stretched. Every ring of a phone made my chest tighten. Every movement in my stomach reminded me that my daughter was inside a body Nathan had tried to turn into leverage. At 1:36 a.m., an officer from Oklahoma called Lauren. They had found Caleb. He was safe. Nathan was not there. The officer said Caleb had been left in the motel room with a prepaid phone, a backpack, and instructions to tell anyone who asked that his father had gone to get food. But Nathan had not gone for food. According to the front desk clerk, he had left in a dark SUV with a woman about 20 minutes before police arrived. Lauren asked if the woman was Marissa. The officer said no. He described her as younger, blonde, and carrying a child's backpack. Diane closed her eyes. Brianna, she whispered. By morning, I had not slept, but I felt strangely awake in a way that had nothing to do with rest. My life had broken open in less than 24 hours, and inside it were more rooms than I ever knew existed. At 8:12 a.m., Nathan called me. Not Lauren. Not Diane. Me. Olivia looked at the screen, then nodded. Answer, but say nothing unless you have to. I put him on speaker. His voice sounded rough, exhausted, and frighteningly calm. Emma, he said, I need you to listen very carefully, because everyone is lying to you except me. I almost laughed, but I stayed silent. He kept going. I made mistakes, but I did everything to keep this family from collapsing, And if you sign one document this morning, I can fix the house, fix Lauren, fix Caleb's school, fix the baby's future, and make sure nobody has to know how bad this got. There it was again. The same trap. One signature. One more chance. One last emergency. Olivia was recording. Lauren was crying silently. Diane looked destroyed. I placed one hand on my stomach and finally answered. No, Nathan. The silence on the line changed instantly. What did you say? I said no. His breathing hardened. You do not understand what you are doing. For the first time, I said, I think I do. Then I asked him the question that had been sitting in my chest since Marissa's call. Who is Mason? For a few seconds, there was no sound at all. Then Nathan whispered, Who told you that name? And that was the confirmation. Not a confession, but close enough. I closed my eyes, and for one painful second, I grieved the man I thought I had married, the family I thought I was building, and the little girl inside me who would one day ask why her father was not in the first photos of her life. Then Nathan said, Emma, do not make me desperate. Olivia's face went pale. Lauren grabbed her phone. Diane stood up like she had been physically struck. I did not answer him. I ended the call. 30 seconds later, a text came through. Then I will come to you. And before anyone could decide what that meant, the hospital called my phone. A nurse from maternity registration said a man claiming to be my husband was downstairs, asking whether I had arrived for an emergency induction. When the nurse said Nathan was downstairs asking whether I had arrived for an emergency induction, my entire body went cold because he was not looking for his wife. He was looking for the version of me he had prepared on paper, frightened, isolated, medically vulnerable, and easier to control. Olivia took the phone from my shaking hand, asked the nurse to connect us with hospital security, and explained in the clearest voice I had ever heard from her that my husband was not authorized to access my file, my room, my medical decisions, or any paperwork connected to me. The nurse did not argue, and that alone told me the alert we had placed the day before had worked. Within minutes, security confirmed Nathan was in the lobby with a printed folder, claiming I had called him about contractions, claiming my sister was keeping me from medical care, and claiming he needed to sign documents because I was too emotional to make decisions. There it was again. The same lie, polished for a new audience. Too emotional. Too pregnant. Too confused. Too unstable. Anything except too close to the truth. Olivia drove us to the hospital anyway, not through the front entrance, but through the employee side drop-off the caseworker had told us to use. And by the time we arrived, Nathan was already surrounded by 2 security officers and a nurse manager who looked like she had heard enough from him. He saw me across the lobby. For 1 second, his face softened into the man I used to know, the man who kissed my forehead at night and talked to our daughter through my stomach. Then he saw Olivia beside me, Diane behind me, Lauren near the doors, and 2 officers walking in from the parking lot, and the softness vanished. Emma, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to turn, tell them you are here willingly. I stared at him because the sentence was so revealing. Not tell them you are safe. Not tell them you are okay. Tell them you are here willingly. He was still thinking in legal language, still building a record, still trying to make my fear look like consent. I am here to protect my medical file, I said, keeping both hands on my stomach. I am not here with you. His eyes flicked toward the folder. Security noticed. So did Olivia. So did the officer. One officer asked Nathan what was inside, and he immediately said it was private family paperwork, but the nurse manager stepped forward and said he had already tried to submit documents at registration under my name. Nathan looked at her like she had betrayed him personally. The officer took the folder. Nathan protested. Marissa's name was on the first page. So was mine. Inside were copies of the power of attorney, a hospital authorization form, a trust transfer request, and a statement claiming I had approved Nathan to act on my behalf if I became unavailable during delivery. At the bottom of one page was my signature. Again, not mine. Close enough to be dangerous, but not close enough anymore. Because now I was standing there, awake, aware, protected, and finally surrounded by people who understood that Nathan's calm voice was not proof of innocence. It was part of the weapon. The officer asked him whether I had signed the forms. Nathan looked at me, then at Diane, then at Lauren, and for one terrible second I thought he might still try to lie. Instead, he said, "She was supposed to." That sentence broke something open. Not legally, maybe, but emotionally. Because there it was, spoken in front of witnesses. Not she did. Not she agreed. She was supposed to. As if my consent had been a scheduling problem. As if my mother's money, my hospital room, my body, my baby, and my signature were all parts of a plan I had inconvenienced by waking up too soon. Diane began crying quietly. Lauren turned away. Olivia gripped my hand so hard it hurt. I did not cry. I had cried too much already for the woman who trusted him. The woman standing in that hospital lobby had no tears left for him. Then another officer walked in with a woman beside him. She was blonde, young, exhausted, and holding a little boy against her hip. Diane whispered, "Brianna." Nathan's whole face changed. Not shame, not tenderness. Panic. Brianna looked at me first, then Lauren, then Diane, and finally Nathan, and whatever story he had told her clearly fell apart the moment she saw all of us standing together. The little boy in her arms had Nathan's eyes. I felt the truth land before anyone said it. Mason, the third dependent, the hidden child, the missing part of the financial worksheet. Brianna told the officer Nathan had called her from Oklahoma, saying everything was collapsing because Emma's family got involved, and he needed her to come to Austin with Mason because he was going to secure the trust money. Before I changed my mind completely. Secure. That was the word she used. Not borrow. Not ask. Secure. Nathan said her name once, sharply, like a warning. Brianna ignored him. That was when the story finally stopped belonging to him. Lauren gave police the motel information. Marissa forwarded the trust documents and her messages. Diane handed over the voicemail. Olivia sent the screenshots, the bank case number, the hospital notes, and every text Nathan had sent since the shower. I confirmed the signatures were not mine. And Nathan, who had controlled every room for years by making each woman feel alone, stood in a hospital lobby watching all of us compare notes in front of him. He was detained that morning, not dragged away like a movie villain, not screaming, not confessing everything, just handcuffed with that same stunned anger on his face, like the true crime was that everyone had stopped believing him at the same time. The next weeks were ugly, slow, and nothing like justice on television. There were reports, attorneys, emergency hearings, frozen accounts, fraud affidavits, bank reviews, hospital security restrictions, and long calls where I had to explain again and again that my husband had forged my signature while I was pregnant. The inheritance account was protected because my mother had done one last powerful thing for me before she died. She had made sure no husband could touch what she left unless I clearly allowed it. I used to think that clause was cold. Now I think it was love. Lauren got Caleb back safely, and although he was confused and hurt in ways no child should be, he was at least with the parent who had stopped pretending everything was fine. Brianna cooperated because, according to her, Nathan had also promised her stability, rent money, and a future he never had the legal or moral ability to provide. Marissa faced her own professional consequences, and although I never fully forgave her, I did believe she helped stop the worst thing before it happened. Diane apologized to me more times than I could count. She said she had always known Nathan could bend the truth when money was involved, but she had never wanted to believe her son could turn a pregnant wife into a signature he needed. I understood her pain, but I also understood something else. Love can explain blindness. It cannot excuse silence forever. 3 weeks later, I gave birth to my daughter with Olivia beside me, Diane waiting down the hall, and my hospital file locked so tightly that even the wrong flower delivery could not have gotten through without permission. I named her Lily Grace. Not because life felt graceful then, because it did not. I named her that because when the nurse placed her on my chest, tiny and furious and alive, I realized grace is not always softness. Sometimes grace is surviving the moment someone tried to turn your weakness into their opportunity. Nathan was not in the room. His name was not on my emergency contact list. His hands were not near my paperwork. His voice was not the first one my daughter heard. And when I looked at her, I made a promise I knew I would spend the rest of my life keeping. No one would ever teach her that love means surrendering her safety. The legal case continued long after Lily came home, and I will not pretend the ending was clean, because betrayal leaves paperwork, debt, custody issues, grief, and memories that do not disappear just because the villain gets exposed. But the money my mother left was preserved. The fraudulent applications were blocked. The hospital documents were removed. The power of attorney was invalidated. And Nathan finally had to face people who could not be charmed with a sad story about pressure, fatherhood, or sacrifice. The last time I saw him before the temporary protective order was extended, he looked at me in the courthouse hallway and said, "I did everything for my family." I looked at him, then at Lily sleeping against my chest, and I understood why that sentence used to work. It sounded noble. It sounded burdened. It sounded like a man carrying too much. But now I knew what he really meant. He did everything for the family he had invented in his own mind, the one where women absorbed the damage, children became excuses, money became survival, and my consent was just another obstacle to work around. So I answered him once and only once. "You did everything for yourself." Then I walked away. I still think about my mother often, especially when I sit in the nursery at night, rocking Lily in the dark while the house is quiet and my phone stays face down on the table. I think about how my mother saved every dollar she could, not because she wanted me rich, but because she wanted me free. I think about how close I came to letting Nathan turn that freedom into a cage. And I think about Diane's hand on my wrist at the baby shower, squeezing hard enough to hurt, because sometimes the warning that saves you does not arrive gently. It arrives shaking. It arrives late. But if you listen, it still arrives in time. The hardest lesson was not that my husband lied. The hardest lesson was realizing he had counted on my love, my pregnancy, my grief, and my desire to keep peace as tools he could use against me. That is why I tell this story now. Not because I want people to fear marriage. Not because every secret is a crime. But because when someone asks you to trust them while hiding documents, moving money, isolating you from other women, and calling you emotional every time you ask a clear question, they are not protecting you from stress. They are protecting themselves from exposure. And if my mother's last gift taught me anything, it is this. Money is not just money when it is the only door you have left. A signature is not just a signature when someone else is holding the pen. And love is not love when it needs you powerless to survive.